The words came out of my husband's mouth in the middle of his mother's new living room, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean, in a house I had just purchased for her with my own money. "You're an embarrassment, Claire." His voice was cold, measured, the kind of controlled anger that's somehow worse than shouting. His mother, Diane, stood frozen by the marble fireplace, her hand covering her mouth. I was still holding the deed, the document that proved I'd just spent $8.8 million on a cliffside mansion in Malibu, as a thank you gift for the only person in his family who'd ever treated me like I mattered. Beside him, his sister Lauren smirked, arms crossed like she'd been waiting years for someone to finally say it out loud. "People like you," my husband continued, "don't understand that money doesn't buy class. You can't just throw cash around and expect people to forget where you came from." I looked from his disgusted expression to his sister's satisfied smile to his mother's horrified face. In my purse, barely 3 feet away, sat documentation that would change everything. A portfolio statement showing $340 million in assets, a corporate ownership structure revealing I'd quietly become the majority shareholder in the very tech company my husband claimed to run, and divorce papers I'd had prepared 2 weeks earlier after overhearing a conversation he thought I'd never hear. Instead of crying, I smiled. "What's so funny?" Lauren snapped. I took a slow breath, set the deed down on the $47,000 Italian marble coffee table I'd also paid for, and answered in the calmest voice I'd used all day. "Actually, I think we should talk about where you came from, Jason. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand how a 41-year-old woman who grew up in a trailer park in Nevada ended up standing in an $8.8 million mansion, holding the deed to a house her own husband thought she had no right to buy. My name is Claire Mitchell. Well, it was Claire Brennan before I married Jason. And honestly, it might be Brennan again soon. If you'd met me 15 years ago, you would have seen exactly what Jason's family sees now. A woman who doesn't quite fit. I didn't go to the right schools. I don't summer in the Hamptons. I still pronounce certain words the way my mother did, with that slight Nevada twang that no amount of elocution classes can completely erase. I'm a software engineer by training, which means I spent my 20s writing code in dark rooms, while other people my age were building social networks and attending charity galas. I loved solving impossible problems, finding the elegant solution hiding inside thousands of lines of messy logic. I built a career on seeing patterns other people missed. I just never thought I'd need those skills to decode my own marriage. Jason and I met when I was 26, working 70-hour weeks at a struggling startup in San Francisco. He was charming, ambitious, a business development manager who could walk into any room and make everyone believe he was the most important person in it. He had an MBA from a decent state school, and a confidence that made you think he came from money. Even though he'd grown up solidly middle class in Sacramento, I loved watching him work a room, the way he could make investors lean in, make clients laugh, make strangers feel like old friends. I never stopped to consider that a man who's that good at performing authenticity might be performing it everywhere, including at home. When we got engaged, his mother, Diane, was the only one who seemed genuinely happy for us. His father had already passed away, but his sister, Lauren, made it very clear that I wasn't quite what she'd envisioned for her brother. "She's nice," I overheard her tell Jason at our engagement party. "But is she really Mitchell material?" I pretended not to hear. Diane was different. She'd grown up working class herself, a nurse who'd put herself through school while raising 2 kids after her husband died young from a heart attack. She saw something in me that her daughter never could. She saw herself. "Don't let them make you feel small. Sweetheart," she told me the week before the wedding, "you earned your place at that table." I loved her for that. For the first 5 years of our marriage, things seemed fine. Not perfect, but fine. Jason's career progressed steadily. We bought a nice house in Palo Alto, the kind of place where people pretend their mortgages don't terrify them. We hosted dinner parties. We talked about having kids eventually. I kept working, kept coding, kept contributing to our joint savings account every month like a responsible spouse. What Jason didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd also been building something else. 6 years into our marriage, 3 engineers I'd worked with at that struggling startup reached out with an idea. They were developing enterprise security software, the kind that protects corporate data from sophisticated cyber attacks. They needed someone who understood both the technical architecture and the business model. They needed me. I invested $50,000 of my own money I'd saved separately, before the marriage, from stock options at my previous job and became a founding partner with 18% equity. Jason knew I was helping some friends with a project. He didn't ask for details. By that point, he'd become busy with his own career, spending longer hours at the office, traveling frequently for client development. The company was called Sentinel Systems. 3 years after we launched, we landed our first major contract with a Fortune 100 financial institution. 2 years after that, we were processing security for 14 of the top 20 banks in America. Last year, we were acquired by a major tech conglomerate. My 18% stake became $340 million. I told Jason we'd had a successful exit. I showed him paperwork indicating I'd made $2-3 million. He'd been thrilled, immediately talking about upgrading our house, buying a place in Tahoe, finally getting the lifestyle he deserved. I didn't correct him. The truth was carefully hidden in a trust structure my attorney had established years earlier, long before the acquisition, designed to protect my assets and manage the tax implications of a major liquidity event. Jason never looked closely at the paperwork. He never asked detailed questions. He was too busy celebrating what he thought was our success. I watched him that night, making calls to his friends, posting carefully worded updates on social media about exciting new chapters, and I realized something that made my chest feel tight. He was proud of the money, but he'd never once asked about the work. He'd never asked what I'd built, what problems we'd solved, what kept me up at night during those early years when we weren't sure the company would survive. He just wanted to know what we could buy with it. That should have been my first warning. The problem started about 8 months ago. Jason's company, the boutique consulting firm where he'd worked his way up to VP of strategy, was struggling. They'd lost 2 major clients in the same quarter, and office gossip suggested layoffs were coming. He became distant, irritable, started making comments about my clothes, my hair, the way I spoke at dinner parties. "You said you guys 3 times tonight," he told me after one event. "It's unprofessional. You sound like you're still working at a gas station." I had worked at a gas station for 3 years to pay for community college before transferring to a 4-year university. I wasn't ashamed of that, but Jason clearly was. Then came the comments about Diane. She'd been living in a small 2-bedroom condo in Glendale, the same place she'd moved into after selling the family home when Jason's father died. The building was aging, the neighborhood was getting rougher, and her retirement savings were modest at best. I'd been sending her money quietly for years, helping with property taxes, medical bills, things Jason never noticed because he'd long ago stopped paying attention to his mother's day-to-day struggles. One afternoon, I drove out to visit her, and I saw how bad things had really gotten. The elevator was broken again. There was mold growing in the bathroom. The air conditioning had been out for 6 weeks, and the landlord kept promising repairs that never came. She was 68 years old. She'd spent her whole life taking care of other people. She deserved better, so I started looking at houses. Not big houses, not mansions, just something safe, comfortable, maybe near the ocean where she'd always dreamed of retiring. The real estate agent, probably seeing an opportunity, showed me a stunning cliffside property in Malibu. 4 bedrooms, ocean views, a garden that would have made Diane cry with happiness. The price was $8.8 million. I bought it the next day, cash. I didn't tell Jason until after the sale closed. I wanted it to be a surprise, a grand gesture for a woman who'd shown me more maternal love in 10 years than my own. Mother had managed in 20. When I finally told him 2 weeks ago, his reaction wasn't what I expected. "You did what?" "I bought your mother a house in Malibu. I wanted to surprise her for her birthday." His face went through several expressions: shock, confusion, and then something darker. "How much? Does it matter?" "She deserves it, Jason. She's been living in that falling-apart condo." "How much?" $8.8 million. The silence that followed was one of the longest of my life. "Are you insane?" he finally said. "Do you have any idea how that looks? My wife buying my mother a house that expensive. Like I can't provide for my own family? It's not about you. Everything is about me, Claire. I have a reputation. I have colleagues, clients, a professional image to maintain. What do you think people will say when they find out my wife is throwing around money like some lottery? Winner who doesn't know better?" The words hit harder than I expected. Some lottery winner. That's what I was to him. Not a successful entrepreneur. Not a woman who'd built something valuable through years of hard work. Just someone who'd gotten lucky and didn't have the good sense to stay quiet about it. I didn't argue. I just told him the closing was next week, and his mother was going to be there to receive the deed. If you have a problem with it, I said, don't come. He came. Of course he came. And he brought Lauren. The day we handed Diane the deed started out beautifully. The house was even more stunning in person than in the photographs. Sunlight poured through massive windows overlooking the Pacific. The garden was already blooming with roses, lavender, and jasmine. There was a reading nook Diane would love, a kitchen built for someone who actually enjoyed cooking, and a master suite with a balcony that faced straight toward the sunset. Diane walked through it with tears streaming down her face. Claire, she kept saying. Claire, this is too much. This is too much. It's not, I told her, squeezing her hand. You spent 30 years taking care of other people. Let someone take care of you. Jason stood in the corner of the living room, arms crossed, jaw tight. Lauren wandered through the house with an expression that looked like she was touring a crime scene. When Diane and I went out to the garden to look at the roses, I heard them talking in low voices inside. This is humiliating, Jason said. I know, Lauren replied. Where does she even get off? Buying a house like this when she grew up in a trailer? I froze behind the glass door. She doesn't understand our family, Jason continued. She doesn't understand that there's a right way to do things. You don't just flash money around. You don't make grand gestures that make other people look small. You need to do something about her, Lauren said. Seriously, Jason, she's making you look weak. That's when I walked back inside, Diane following behind me, still wiping happy tears from her eyes. Jason straightened up. His expression shifted into something colder, more controlled. And that's when he said it. You're an embarrassment, Claire. The room went silent. Diane's smile disappeared. Jason, what? He held up a hand. No, Mom, this needs to be said. He turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, something worse. Contempt. People like you don't understand that money doesn't buy class. You can't just throw cash around and expect people to forget where you came from. Lauren nodded. He's right. This whole thing it's tacky, honestly. I stood there, holding the deed to an $8.8 million house I'd purchased with money I'd earned, being called tacky by a woman whose entire lifestyle was funded by credit cards and her mother's retirement savings. And I smiled, because in that moment, I realized something I'd been avoiding for months. I didn't love Jason anymore. Maybe I never really had. I'd loved the idea of him, the version of myself I became when I was with him, the life we'd promised each other. But the man standing in front of me, embarrassed by an act of generosity toward his own mother, I didn't know him at all. What's so funny? Lauren snapped. I set the deed down on the coffee table, the one I'd paid for. In the house I'd paid for a woman I actually loved. Actually, I said, I think we should talk about where you came from, Jason. He blinked. Excuse me? You grew up in a 1,400-square-foot ranch house in Sacramento. Your dad was a middle manager at an insurance company. Your mom was a nurse. You went to Sacramento State, not Stanford. Your first car was a used Honda Civic. His face started to redden. There's nothing wrong with any of that, I continued. It's a good, honest, middle-class upbringing. But let's not pretend. You came from some dynasty of old money and refined taste. Lauren opened her mouth. I kept going. And Lauren, you're drowning in debt from a lifestyle you can't afford, living in a condo your mother co-signed, because you couldn't qualify on your own income. So maybe let's skip the lecture about class. How dare you? I dare, I said quietly, because I'm tired. I looked at Jason. I'm tired of making myself smaller so you can feel bigger. I'm tired of pretending I'm not successful because it threatens you. I'm tired of apologizing for where I came from when the only thing I should be apologizing for is not seeing who you really are. Diane was staring at her son like she'd never seen him before. Claire, Jason said, his voice dropping into that dangerous calm again. You need to stop talking. Right now. Or what? Silence. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. Inside were 3 documents. A complete financial disclosure showing my actual net worth, $340 million. Corporate records showing that 6 months ago, I'd quietly purchased a controlling stake in Jason's struggling consulting firm through a shell corporation. Divorce papers already filed, citing irreconcilable differences. I handed him the folder. What is this? He asked. That, I said, is the truth you were too busy to notice. He opened it. I watched his face change as he read through the pages. First confusion, then shock, then something close to panic. You own my company? 51% of it, yes. I bought it when your board was looking for an emergency investor. They had no idea I was your wife. I used a trust structure. Why would you? Because despite everything, I didn't want to watch you fail. I thought maybe if the company stabilized, you'd be less angry, less resentful. I paused. I was wrong. The company's doing fine now. You're just an angry person. Lauren grabbed the papers from his hand, scanning them frantically. 340 million? She read aloud. You have 340 million? Had, I corrected. The number changes daily with the market. Jason's hands were shaking. You lied to me. No, I protected myself. There's a difference. This is community property. Half of this is mine. Actually, I said, you'll want to look at page 7. The prenuptial agreement you insisted on when we got married, the one that keeps all premarital assets and business interests separate. Turns out that protects my assets very effectively. Sentinel Systems was founded with my premarital money. The company I built, the equity I earned, the windfall from the acquisition, all separate property. His face went white. Your attorney can confirm, I added. I had mine review everything very carefully. Diane finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Jason, you wanted a prenup? He couldn't look at her. He insisted on it, I said. Said it was just practical. Smart business. I agreed because I had nothing to protect at the time. I smiled. Turns out it was the best decision I ever made. Lauren was still staring at the corporate documents. You own his company. You could fire him. I could, I agreed. But I won't. The board likes him. He's actually quite good at his job when he's not busy being ashamed of his wife. I picked up my purse. The divorce papers are already filed. You'll be served officially next week. I'm keeping the Palo Alto house. It's in my name, purchased with my earnings. You have 30 days to move out. Claire, I've transferred $2 million to a separate account for you. That's more than generous, given that you're not entitled to any of my business assets. But I'm not cruel. You can get a nice apartment, keep your car, maintain your lifestyle. I turned to Diane. This house is yours. Fully paid. Property taxes covered for the next 10 years through a trust I established. You never have to worry about housing again. She was crying again, but different tears this time. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me visit sometimes. She hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. I looked at Jason one more time. For what it's worth, I really did love you, or I loved who I thought you were. I paused at the door. But you were right about one thing. Money doesn't buy class. It just reveals who already had it. I walked out of that $8.8 million house into the California sunshine and drove away from a marriage that had been over long before I'd finally admitted it to myself. The next 3 months were surprisingly painless. Jason tried to contest the divorce, hired an aggressive attorney, who spent weeks looking for loopholes in the prenuptial agreement, before finally admitting there weren't any. He tried to claim emotional distress, argued that I'd been hiding assets, claimed he deserved compensation for supporting my career. Every argument fell apart under basic scrutiny. He moved into a luxury apartment in Santa Monica, paid for with the $2 million I'd given him, money he burned through, in under a year trying to maintain the image of success he thought he deserved. Lauren stopped speaking to both of us, furious that her brother's meal ticket had disappeared and that their mother had sided with me over her own son. Diane and I had lunch every Sunday at her new house. She planted a vegetable garden, joined a book club, started volunteering at a children's hospital near the beach. I've never been happier, she told me one afternoon, sitting on her balcony watching the sunset. Isn't that strange? My son won't speak to me. My daughter thinks I've betrayed the family. And I've never been happier. It's not strange, I said. You're finally free. She squeezed my hand. So are you. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning, exactly 6 months after I'd handed Diane the deed to her house. Jason didn't contest the final terms. His attorney had made it very clear he could accept the generous settlement I was offering, or he could drag things out and potentially end up with less. He signed. I stood outside the courthouse afterward, holding the finalized papers, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, light.